The year is 1887. The problem? Everyone won't stop killing each other. The solution? Create a language that transcends borders. Something to bring about an end to hatred, division, rivalries, even war. This is the story of Esperanto and how me and you almost ended up speaking it. In a small corner of the Russian Empire, one man, Ludwig Leitzer Zamenhof, was growing up in a city divided by language barriers. In his hometown of Białystok, people spoke Russian, Polish, Yiddish, and German, often without understanding one another. An eye doctor by trade, Zamenhof was a natural polyglot. It's hard to put a figure on exactly how many languages he learned throughout his life, but it's thought to be more than 10, including Russian, Polish, German, Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. When growing up, he saw for himself how miscommunication and misunderstanding could lead to tension and violence, as Zamenhof once reflected in a letter he sent to his linguistic colleague Nikolai Borovko. The place where I was born gave direction to all my future struggles. In Białystok, the inhabitants were divided into 4 distinct elements: Russian, Poles, Germans, and Jews. Each of these spoke their own language and looked on all the others as enemies. I was taught that all people were brothers, and this was always a great torment to my infant mind. I often said to myself that when I grew up, I would certainly destroy this evil. So at the age of 28, he set to work to fix this by devising a language so simple that anyone could learn it. His language was designed to be easy. Most of its influence comes from Romance languages, but there's also stuff there from Germanic and Slavic languages. And the grammar is as simple as possible. For a start, there are no masculine or feminine nouns found in languages like German and Spanish, and the language itself only has 3 simple and consistent tenses: past, present, and future. Each type of word also has a specific ending to show exactly what it is. For example, nouns end in O, adjectives end in A, and adverbs end in E. Esperanto is also what linguists call an agglutinative language, meaning prefixes and suffixes can be stuck onto its root words to create entirely new meanings. Take the word liber, for example, meaning free. Add an edge at the end to turn it into a physical place, an O to show it's a noun, and mal at the front to flip its meaning to the opposite. And all of a sudden you have malibereo, a physical place without freedom. Or in other words, a prison. This is the beauty of Esperanto. With just a few rules, you can create thousands of new words. Just have a listen to how a fluent speaker sounds.
Saluton de Budapeŝto, Hungario, mi estas Stella, kaj la lingvo kiun mi parolas estas Esperanto. Kio estas Esperanto? Zamenhof en la 19. jarcento kreis tiun ĉi artefaritan lingvon, kiu estas mia denaska lingvo.
So Zamenhof set out the rules and regulations of his new language in his first book, A Nuevo Libro, which was published in 1887 under the pen name Dr. Esperanto, meaning the one who hopes in the language. No prizes for guessing where the name came from. Esperanto's growth was slow at first. In fact, to get his language off the ground, Zamenhof asked people to sign a pledge that they would promise to learn and use Esperanto once 10 million others had made the same commitment. Though only a few thousand responded, Zamenhof was undeterred, and as the years went by, Esperanto's popularity began to increase. Esperanto clubs and societies popped up across Europe, publishing magazines, newsletters, providing a place for speakers to connect with one another. And the language also found a place in the growing internationalist and socialist movements, gaining traction in the late 19th century. It even found support from thinkers at the time, such as J.R.R. Tolkien, Leo Tolstoy, and Pope Pius X. In fact, in 1930, J.R.R. Tolkien would actually be appointed as an advisor for the British Esperanto Association, and the language almost found a place to be used in the real world in a place called Neutral Moresnet, a small, unique political territory between Germany and Belgium. It was seen as the perfect place to trial an Esperanto utopia, where the peaceful values of the language could be put into practice. Unfortunately, it never quite worked out. But by the turn of the century, Esperanto fever was in full flow, and in 1905 the first ever Esperanto conference was held here, in Boulogne-sur-Mer, aiming to promote and advance the language's cause. Even the big man himself was there, and he would give a speech that would go down in Esperanto history. We stand one beside the other, not like strangers, but like brothers and sisters, who understand without distrusting because of dividing shadowy misunderstandings, who love one another and shake hands with one another, not hypocritically like foreigners, but sincerely, man to man. Flash forward 15 years, and with the small little world war out of the way, Esperanto's doctrine and idealism was now more relevant than ever beforehand. This is where things get really interesting. The newly formed League of Nations is looking for ways to stop more of this. And so at the 1920 Assembly, the delegates get around the table. Step up Iran of all countries with a bold idea. Let's make Esperanto the official language for diplomacy, to make it the international auxiliary language, to put in foundations for everyone to learn it as a second language. What a great idea, everyone says, so they put it to a vote. We are one step away from Esperanto being adopted by what would eventually inspire the United Nations, something that could, in theory, have changed the course of history and possibly the language that you'd be listening to right now. Slowly, the votes come in. There's 10 in favour. But wait, who's that? Bonjour. It turned out the French weren't too happy with being replaced as the long-standing language of international diplomacy, which at this point it had been for over 300 years. So they slapped a big fat veto on the idea, leaving Esperanto shelved and its ultimate aims agonisingly close to being set in motion. And the French even went one step further. Not content with condemning Esperanto on the world stage, they banned it in all of France's universities for supposedly being a tool to spread communist propaganda. Rejected on the international stage, things only got worse for Esperanto in the following decades, and soon its speakers would find themselves persecuted and attacked in all manner of ways. Because much of Esperanto's philosophy was rooted in internationalist thinking, it soon found itself under attack from new regimes that wanted to promote nationalism and a distrust of foreign influence.
Who said that?
And because of Zamenhof's Jewish background, in 1925 Adolf Hitler would claim that Esperanto was part of a Jewish plot to take over the world. And the language would be banned in Germany in 1935. Esperanto speakers were also targeted in Russia as part of Stalin's Great Purge. Many Soviet Esperantists were arrested, exiled, or executed. And in Francoist Spain, Esperanto speakers were closely monitored and their actions restricted. Esperanto groups were soon forced to disband, and its speakers had little recourse against the repressive measures facing them. And so the language was forced underground. Many speakers were sent to concentration camps during World War II, and there are even stories of prisoners teaching the language as a covert one, hidden from guards under the guise that it was Italian. After World War II, Esperanto's influence on the world stage would keep diminishing. The Esperanto conferences that began in 1905 would, however, still continue every year, and in fact they still do today. So what happened? Well, the reality is that it was hard to find speakers conversing outside of this bubble, so increasingly the language became a niche. And with a lack of institutional support or adoption for use by any major organisation, and the increasing dominance of English as the world's lingua franca, Esperanto failed to keep up in a rapidly developing post-war world. Its influence was still to be found in interesting corners of popular culture, such as a 1966 horror film called Incubus, which was recorded entirely in Esperanto and features a pre-Star Trek William Shatner, or a small snippet of the recording being included in the Voyager 1 Golden Record. Multiple references are made throughout the popular British sci-fi series Red Dwarf.
Wait a minute, I know this one. Don't tell me.
I hope when you come the weather will be clement.
Or what about when Michael Jackson used it in a video to promote his 1995 album, His Story? And a little video game series called Grand Theft Auto would even name a certain car model after the language. Esperanto would trundle along in the background of history until the 21st century arrived, when the internet breathed new life into it by facilitating communication between its speakers across the world in a way never seen before. It also made it easier for people to learn the language through dictionaries, YouTube channels, and forums, and in 2015 it would be included on Duolingo. And at one point, over 1 million people were learning it on the app. In fact, so much was its popularity that in 2017 the Esperanto Association increased the number of beginner courses they offered fourfold to keep up with demand. This all leads us to today, where Esperanto is easily the most widely spoken constructed language in the world, with the amount of total speakers estimated to be somewhere in the region between 200,000 to 2 million, including some 1,000 speakers who were taught Esperanto as their native language. It's unlikely that Esperanto will ever see the popularity it did in the early 20th century. Instead, it is the English that me and you speak that has taken over the world. But it's easy to forget that it wasn't always like this, and had certain things gone differently, we might be in a very different place. It's also unclear if Esperanto's ultimate aim to promote world peace would have worked, even if it was adopted, or if it could have stayed standardised at all. After all, languages are living things, even if they're conceived on paper. What is clear is that Esperanto was created with a noble purpose: to foster unity and peace through communication. And while it may not have become the world's second language, it had the balls to think outside the box, and in doing so, it created a vibrant and unique global community. And we can all take a little bit of humility from a certain Dr. Esperanto.